How's it going, artists? Walid here. Today we're gonna look at some of the best ways you can improve your paintings. And some of them might not be exactly what you think about, so stay tuned all the way to the end. And if you like this kind of stuff, hit subscribe. And also it's my birthday today, so hit that like button as well. Let's get painting, guys. Tip number 1, use your dynamic range. By having deep blacks and brilliant highlights, you expose a much stronger impression to your audience. You can keep this in mind while painting and drawing, but you can also tweak this in the very end of your painting. Let's take a look at this example right here. Here's one of the paintings I show you how to make in my course Cinematic Design, specifically the matte painting module. Right now, I've purposefully lessened the dynamic range a bit, so the darks aren't so dark and the brights not too bright. We can push this further to make this painting pop out much more. Check this out. I can use something like levels, so Command L or Control L. And this will bring up levels here in Photoshop, and I can start by pushing up this here, and you see how these blacks here are really becoming deeper. And then the brights can make it a little bit more like that. Maybe push it down a bit more. So if you check, this is after, this is before. So you see how it really pops out much more. Tip number 2, simplify your shapes. I see this issue all the time in many students' artworks, and that is that there is just way too much complexity in their paintings. Too many shapes, too much texture, etc. A mindset that you will hear me talk about through my courses and my videos is simplification. You know, the very best concepts and artworks are often very simple if you break down the major shapes. Details are small shapes that are definitely helpful, but for the majority of your painting, you want to keep it simple. Take a look at this painting I made a few years back. Another example from my cinematic design course. It does have a ton of detail and things happening, but let's squint our eyes. What will we see? This is how this painting reads. The same story, the same composition. If you squint your eyes at the original painting, this is pretty much what you'll see. Almost everything is the same. So what's the difference? The details. What can we take from this? Well, the details aren't really that important. You know, the shapes, forms, and compositions are by far more important for our overall story and concept, and learning how to simplify our painting's most fundamental aspects. Practice this, artists. Simplify. Tip number 3, use pleasing proportions. To achieve a great composition, you must understand proportion and its relationships. This is something I talk about a lot in my cinematic design course, and it's what helps a lot of artists really grow fast. And this doesn't have to be hard at all to do. Here's an easy and great rule of thumb for creating pleasing proportions in your artworks. Use 70% big shapes, 20% medium-sized shapes, and 10% small shapes. You can tweak these as you please, but typically start here and you'll see how your paintings and concepts will improve because of the balance. Here's a few examples of that. Here's a painting from the course as well. It's where I teach you how to paint clouds and stuff. So you can see here that this has, you can simplify this quite a lot, and the proportions here are basically laid out like this. So I just have this thing here, and we can see that there are mainly like a lot of portion of this is all these big shapes. And then you have some other big shapes and some smaller shapes. These, for example. And then you have some really small shapes, like these kind of things. So that's where you want to have 70-ish% for the big shapes, about 20% for the medium shapes, and then 10% small shapes. So another example of this is right here. So you can see that this thing here, this visual thing to the left, is much more interesting than this one. You have a lot of big shapes here. Most of this painting, or most of this image. And then you have some medium shapes and a bunch of small ones. which make up about 10%, and then this makes up 70, and then this makes up 20. Here you have kind of like the same sort of ratio. You have almost the same amount of white as the dark. You have similar proportions between them, and yeah, it's not such a great proportion between these. So these are decent examples of that. And then you can also have these shapes inside of shapes, but they still kind of read as one big shape. If you squint your eyes and you blur your vision, you start to see that it's actually quite simple what it is that I've done here. Even if there's a bunch of texture and stuff in here, you can see that the shapes are managed nicely, the edges are nice. There's not too many crazy sharp edges everywhere, but rather where I want you to look, and things are kind of pointing in here as well. So that's example to take with you. Tip number 4, control your saturation. When painting beautiful concepts of characters, people, environments, strong colors can really make your paintings extra beautiful. Here's a sketch I made before going to bed a while back, and I call it Dream Cloud Mountain. You see, it's a very saturated painting, but our eyes still get drawn to the center mountain that stands proud in front of our character. There is a sense of story and majesty to this, and the saturation adds to it. There's not too much saturation elsewhere. So remember to use saturated colors where you want your audience to be attracted, basically your focal points. Here's another example which is super saturated, but I still lead your eye into the center through this powerful contrast I have here of light. Play around with this and see if you can't come up with some really neat paintings in this very saturated way. Tip number 5, add finishing touches. You know, there's lots you can do to improve your painting once you're done with it, but be careful because you can also destroy it. The final adjustments should amplify your painting, not take away from it. Here's a few things you can do. Levels. Like I talked about in the first tip, use that dynamic range. So here, for example, you can bring up levels. Let's darken down these blacks here. Make it a bit brighter. And you see, massive difference. Color balance. You can tweak the look and feel of your painting in the end to be warmer, colder, more purple, anything you want. Try to tweak it to the best of your ability to really get the most out of your piece. Sharpening. A little bit of sharpening on the right places goes a long way. Add film grain or noise. You can hit Alt here, create a new layer, and when you do that, you can go to Mode, go to Overlay, fill with Overlay neutral color, so it's just like a layer with 50% gray, and then an overlay there. And now I can go up to Filter, go to Noise, add Noise. Now you'll see it's going to add this sort of noisy texture here. And you can go to Blur, Gaussian Blur, just make it a little bit blurry. Something like that. Maybe even make it a bit bigger. So you see it just adds this thing here. Doesn't do much more than that. And then we just decrease the opacity. So you see it just adds that extra little bit of grain to our painting. Make it kind of filmic like that. But don't overdo this. Chromatic aberration. Like the previous one, this one is a bit tricky, but done right, it can really make your image look filmic. As light bends through the optics of the camera lens glass, it will break apart ever so slightly, and it will create a slight colorful blur with bluish tints on one end and then red on another. So here's how you can create that. You can basically take your painting here, just make a stamp visible. The way I do that, by the way, is make a new layer by hitting Shift, Alt, Command, or Shift, Alt, Control, and then N. And then you can do Shift, Alt, Command, E. So that will stamp everything. And then you right-click, you duplicate the layer. So now I have two of them here. And I want to click this top layer here and go into layer style and take away green and blue. So what happens now, if I just hit Command T there, I can transform. If I start transforming this, it will be creating this really strange effect, kind of like those 3D cinemas. But you want to use warp and just a little bit of this stuff on the edges maybe. You see you can do this, but you just want to add a little bit of that chromatic aberration, not too much because that actually hurts the eyes to look at. So a bit like that, maybe take it here a bit. Maybe a bit behind here. And that should be enough. So that just adds a little bit of chromatic aberration here and there. But like now you see that it kind of messed up this thing here. So I can just hit E, erase, and just take that away. Erase that part of that layer there. And if there was too much, let's say on these characters here, you can always go in here and erase that part from that layer. So you can see that there's some stuff around, and then the characters pop a bit more. But yeah, you can definitely overdo this effect, so take it slow. Alright, so that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and if you liked it, go ahead and subscribe and hit the like button. Now I'll be doing a bunch more of these. So in the end of the day, remember that practice makes progress. You know, I always say that, and it's so important to realize and to understand, because you know, you can't just like cherry pick stuff here and there and just expect that you'll be much better like that. It's all about putting in the time, putting in the practice, but you can practice smart. You know, you can do the proper things to really push your skill levels. Now, I hope you continue enjoying my videos, because I always teach you the very practical stuff to do for your art. And I also have a course called Cinematic Design, so if you'd like to check that out, that's open for enrollment right now. There's a bunch more people in there right now, and it's really fun to see them improve their skills. There's a bunch of stuff in there about design principles, giving you a full foundation to your art, especially for beginners. And then about characters and environments and rendering materials and matte painting and a bunch more cool stuff in there. And there's even a module about making money with your art and making it into an actual career. Alright artists, that's about it. Until next time, stay creative.